Today, we're going to talk about technology as a partner. It's a little bit of a touchy subject with some contractors. So, in the meantime, while we wait for everyone to join, we'll start about 2:05. We're going to shoot a poll question out to you and also remind you about the Line Hall Summit. If you have not yet registered, then please go to linehallsummit.com and register. You can use the coupon code GroundForce24 and you will get a discount on your registration. My Ground Force is a gold sponsor, the only gold sponsor. We'll have a major place during the summit. You'll see us everywhere. So we hope to see you there. We're going to get started here. It's 2:05. Welcome to this week's session of the 12-part webinar series, Prosper During the FedEx Transformation. Learn to think like a Fortune 500 executive. Today, we're going to talk about technology as a partner. Hopefully, based on the poll question we just saw, then pretty much everyone understands the importance of technology. So we're going to jump off into this conversation. We're going to start with a little stroll down memory lane, and it's important to understand how things have come over the past period of time and to get us to the point where we are now in society as a whole and trucking in specific. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about a few technologies to know and some things to be aware of it for the future and how you might leverage those in your business going forward. So here we go. We're going to take off here. A little stroll down technology memory lane. Now, one thing I want to say before we stroll down the memory lane here. I hear this a lot from contractors. I know hundreds of contractors, right? I talk to lots of folks, and I hear this on a regular basis. Tim, I'm just not a technology guy. I don't really understand it. I don't know how to use it. We think you have the best system at My Ground Force, but we just don't think we're up to using it. And what I like to tell them is, if you can use your cell phone, you could use the My Ground Force solution, because look, what you're doing with your cell phone when you order from Amazon or you make a deposit with your bank or you order food is a technological marvel. What has to happen in order for you to be able to do that and do it reliably 99.9% of the time is unbelievably complicated. Your cell phone has more computing power than 2 Apollo missions combined. I mean, that's what you have in your hand these days, okay? And so we're gonna take a stroll down memory lane, but my goal today is to help those who are not comfortable and those who will watch on YouTube. If you're not comfortable with technology, look, the technology is now enabled in a way that you're already using extremely advanced technology without even realizing it. Okay, here we go. So let's start it in the 1980s. Look, that's when I got started, right? I'm a 1984 graduate of the Naval Academy. And I remember I got to the fleet and I'm flying state-of-the-art airplanes. I actually got the chance to go to the factory and be the first one to fly a plane off the yard back to the fleet. And we were so excited because that airplane had state-of-the-art tape drives. Do you even know what a tape drive is? I mean, that's crazy to think about now. Most of you don't even know what a tape drive is, but we had tape handling package 1 and tape handling package 2. That's not that long ago. 40 years is not that long ago. And there was no computers, no internet, and no cell phone. In the squadron, we had kind of a word processing program, but it was unbelievably complex and only a couple people were trained on it. There were no cell phones, no internet. Everything was done by paper. And we were actually able to print some stuff out of that special word processing program. Once I got to the squadron, we got some rudimentary type of computers that were really like boat anchors, okay? And so that's where we started this journey, and it's not that long ago. A lot of you can remember that, right? And so think about how we operated then and how hard it would have been to be a line haul contractor in the 80s doing everything by hand, how many people in the back office you would have to have. Look, there was no email, none of that. It was all phone call, Rolodex, I mean, extremely inefficient. So in the 90s, computers showed up. Cell phones showed up. That was a game changer. Computers went through multiple iterations in the 90s. Every 18 months, there was a new generation of computers coming out. And all of a sudden, you could afford to have a computer at your house. Wow, that was, I mean, you might be doing your family budget. You didn't have internet yet. And along the way, then suddenly the internet came out. But what enabled the internet, right? The internet was really an academic exercise. But what enabled the internet? Well, it was a widespread revolution in infrastructure, and yours truly was on the front end of that. In 1993, when I got out of the Navy, the airlines were laying off, so I had to get a real job. And I took a job as a fiber optic engineer, one of the first ones. The people who trained me were the first people to ever slice an optical fiber. What is an optical fiber? I'm sure you hear it a lot. It's actually a piece of glass thinner than your hair that's extremely tightly engineered so that you can send communication signals down that fiber using lasers. Now, this was early stage, right? These were single channel lasers in those days. One laser was transmitting one data stream. Today, you have multiple terabyte data streams, and you might have 400 of them on one fiber. That's where we've come. But that's where we started in the 80s. All of a sudden, that infrastructure explosion enabled the internet to kind of take hold. In 1996 Olympics, there was more fiber deployed into the Atlanta metro area than in any city on the planet. And that's one of the reasons that Atlanta exploded in the late 90s, right? Still been one of the fastest growing places in the country because the communications infrastructure here is second to none. But just think about what happened in the 90s that didn't exist. And then we got along to the 2000s. In the 2000s, I made a transition from the fiber side of the network to the electronic side of the network. And I began deploying state-of-the-art, what's called DWDM, dense wave division multiplexing systems. What that means is you put multiple laser channels on one fiber. And it just exploded the use of the fiber, right? So where you used to be able to use get one channel on one fiber, now you can get multiple channels on one fiber, and it just made internet communications that much more less expensive. And remember, in the 80s, you had Netscape, who was Google before Netscape. The guy who was the CEO of Netscape was Jim Barksdale. 10 years after he sold Netscape, I started working for Jim. He was a billionaire by that point. But I deployed these systems all over the world. I'm intimately familiar with how they revolutionized communications around the world, from a rural village in China to a rural city in Argentina to the entire United States. I put these networks all over the world. And along with that came unbelievable capabilities, right? And so now in the 2010s, remember, personal computers are still changing every 18 months. Every 18 months, you're getting a new computer that is so much better than the one before, you almost can't have the conversation. Okay, and then in the 2010s, we really had a revolution in the cell phone industry. So, we already had cell phones. We started with bricks, then we went to big ones, then we went to flips, and then by the late 2010s, like 2008, the first iPhone comes out. That was a revolution, a smartphone, a thing that could do all kinds of stuff. But then we get into 2010s and the smartphone thing really takes off. The handheld device thing really takes off. You've got iPads, all this stuff. And by the way, all this technology is now moving into the trucking industry. Think about being able to manage your drivers when you have a cell phone. How did you manage it in the old days, right? There was dozens of operations managers walking around the yard telling drivers what to do and handing them pieces of paper and calling ahead on a landline, trying to catch a driver down the road to divert him to another place. Think how hard that was. Now you had GPS was available by this point. So now you could dictate where they went. You could optimize a route. You could communicate with them on a cell phone. You now had computers that you could plan things out. You could do. You could use some software to do finances and operational planning and tractor maintenance. You didn't have AI yet. There was some automation that you could do, and I did some big automation projects in the 2010s, but it wasn't related to some of the AI that we use today. Then you get into the 2020s, which is where we are today. And let me tell you what we can do today from a communications and technology standpoint is unbelievable. If you really know what it takes to do it, and I happen to know that, it's crazy complicated. And it's now reliable to the point that you don't think about it. We all bitch when we drop a call, right? I like to say drop calls are a feature at AT&T, not a bug. But the reality is the reliability of our communications capability these days is so good, we just take it for granted, right? I mean, it's just like furniture in the room. And then 5G comes out. 5G is not a data rate, it's a generation. The fifth generation of cellular technology enables multi-megabit transmissions to your cell phone, which makes every human that's walking around with a smartphone a communications node. Your cars are enabled with the Internet of Things. Your refrigerators, your TVs, right? I mean, you can be watching a show on your phone and then move it to your TV and then move it to your computer. I mean, this kind of stuff is crazy. So if you're doing any of that, you're already technologically adept. And so therefore, you should not be concerned about your ability to handle technology in the trucking space. And we're going to talk about some of that. Cloud-based solutions are now commonplace. Okay, and that allows you complete portability of your communications. If you're a My Ground Force customer, you can take your entire company with you everywhere you go, inside the US, outside the US, wherever, on your cell phone. I mean, just think about that. Every piece of data in your company is in the cloud. It's incredibly cyber secure. You don't have to worry about any ransomware, and you can go anywhere with it. Okay, so that's just crazy. The other thing that's happened so far in the 2020s, and we're only 5 years in, is AI becomes mainstream. You know, Elon Musk is talking about it all the time. Lots of folks are talking about it all the time. Well, we're actually doing it at My Ground Force, and so are other companies in the trucking space. And a lot of that's going on kind of behind the scenes. You don't really see it, but it's here and it's gathering steam. And so we're going to have that conversation today. Now, look, at the bottom of your webinar screen is a toolbar, and it says Q&A. If you have any questions about anything related to technology or anything in general, we're going to have a question and answer session at the end. And so we just covered 35, 40 years in technology as it pertains to communications and computers, which is the primary impact on transportation. And if you have any questions or comments along those way, hey, shoot it into Q&A. So let's move on here. So why technology as a partner? So you own a trucking company, you're involved in a trucking company. Why technology as a partner? Okay, whether you know it or not, excuse me, I got to keep the coffee going. I'm still fighting that shingles thing. I'm on week 5. Medical update. If you're eligible for that shingles shot and you hadn't taken it yet, use me as an example of why you need to get it. Go get that thing. I should have. Okay. Technology is already streamlining operations and increasing efficiency. Now, sometimes we would joke that, well, it doesn't do that at FedEx. And you know, they have a huge problem with technology that they have got to find a way to overcome. Look, they know it. They know it better than anybody else. We're the users on our side, but they're trying to do it on their side. And those guys are the ones responsible for operating disparate systems. You know, I think they have like 6 different major systems of record that they have to try to keep up in. And that's almost impossible. It's incredible to try to think about that, right? So, but in general, things are already been streamlined. Think about all the brokers are now online. And we're looking at this in my ground force for our non-FedEx business in the future. As we talked about in this webinar series, that you have to change the way you think. And an example of us changing the way we think is we talk about strategic planning 1, 3, 5 years out there. We know at some point that in order to continue to deliver on all the capabilities that we have, we're going to need to go into the general trucking market. And we probably need to incorporate a broker capability. The crazy thing is you can integrate broker capability right into the software. Okay, and it's all automated. If you're a general trucking company, if you're running for Amazon and you need to pick up some loads on a truck that they're not running, you can go to a broker, they can get you a load, you'll be running in 5 minutes. I mean, it's some of the craziest stuff out there. The internet enables that. The amazing infrastructure that we talked about enables that. The amazing capability of 5G cell phones enable that. Okay, and so now there's an interconnectedness that we just have never had. And we've increased the velocity with which things can be done, which reduces the cost of doing those things. The more machines do, the lower cost. Okay, now we know at some point in the future, there's going to be the piper's going to have to be paid on that, right? Not everybody is going to be employable in an AI economy. But smart people like you guys on this call and guys in transportation, look, we've had transportation since people toted things on their back and then carried them on donkeys and then in wagons and then in trucks, right? In planes and ships. So it's not going away. Stuff still has to get moved around, okay? All right. Technologies are already available to substantially reduce operating costs for line haul contractors. I remember when we started with the mandatory ELDs, right? A lot of you guys remember that. A lot of people fought that. It got pushed back for a year or two, but finally they got implemented. And look, it was an amazing improvement. The people who were fighting it were the ones that were taking advantage of the paper logs. We all know that. But now we have some control of our drivers that we never had before. However, one of the problems when you come into the FedEx space is you get no training on anything that you're supposed to do. We had that conversation last week during compliance. You know, some of my customers and friends in the FedEx space texted me that, Tim, you just scared the hell out of me with this compliance presentation. I'm like, yeah, man, right? FedEx doesn't tell you everything you need to know until you get caught up. So that's why I wanted to do that and teach it to you. And it's really important that you know how to do all those things. Well, you can use some technology to help you with that now and reduce your cost. Look, we talked about your major costs. Number 1 is capital. We're not managing that for you. But number 2 is labor. Number 3 is fuel. Number 4 is maintenance, the largest part of which is tires. Okay. And we've talked about having solutions for all those. But when you talk about labor, it's what's called direct and indirect labor. Direct labor is what generates revenue. And in our business, the only direct labor you have is a driver. You are indirect labor. All the people helping you that don't drive are indirect labor. And that means the higher your indirect labor costs, the lower your profit margin. There's no way around it. We've talked about flattening the cost curve. You know, you've got the growth curve and you've got the cost curve. And we've talked about flattening this cost curve so all this area under the curve is margin, right? Well, if you grow or you don't do any, or you're not growing and you don't do anything to leverage technology to lower your costs, then your margins are going to be thin and you've got very little margin for error, right? FedEx cancels 1 or 2 runs, and I hear this every week. Tim, I don't know what I'm going to do. They just canceled 2 of my runs. Now I'm in jeopardy. Right? I've been telling you that for a year and a half, right? I mean, this was going to happen, and now it's been happening. And so you need to figure that risk into your business and understand that technology can lower that risk, okay? So AI, I'm going to read this to you. AI-driven solutions in trucking support. Predictive maintenance. We do this in my ground force. Enhanced safety features. We're about to do that in my ground force. And optimal route planning. Well, unfortunately, in the line haul space, FedEx is doing the optimization, and some of us are getting hammered by that, right? And of course, you are using optimization in the ISP or DSP space. But these algorithms allow you to predict maintenance at an ever increasing level of accuracy and keep on schedule, right? How many contractors have you ever talked to that said, we were so busy we completely forgot to do a scheduled maintenance on a truck? I mean, I've heard it many times. I've talked to contractors that didn't know they had to do scheduled maintenance on a truck, right? But again, people get in this industry without understanding all the things you have to do. You don't get any help with FedEx. You know, that's one of the reasons watching this webinar series can be valuable, because we can teach you the things that you need to be paying attention to. In the future, what we're going to be, what's is already present in big trucking companies. If you were to go to Maverick, they have predictive algorithms that are analyzing all the error, all the problems they've had in trucks, and where those problems have shown up, and where they might make changes in future buys of trucks or future maintenance activities on their trucks to reduce their overall cost, right? And we're going to bring that to my ground force as well. That's on the backlog. So these kinds of things are already being used. I remember running maintenance in the squadron back in the day, and we were using 5-part forms and a display board, and people would run around the hangar trying to get things updated and get things fixed, and we were hanging pieces of paper on parts, and I mean, it was nuts. We had no computers. Now you can, what was being done with a dozen people in those days can be done with no people now. That's where we've come. And so then the other thing that you want to understand is how you can use technology as a partner. Is you can leverage these advanced technologies and you can enhance compliance, okay, and reduce your operational risk. And part of the reason of doing that, part of the benefit of that, is that you reduce human error. Okay, and this is what we say. I know I'm talking about my ground force today, but it's built to help contractors do exactly this, right? So we're going to talk about that in a little more detail going forward. But our compliance program is 100% automated, takes no people. Okay, that's for tractors and for drivers, right? It's all fully automated using advanced technologies to stay on top of all that, right? And so that's already here, and you should be considering leveraging these ideas to enhance your company. So what are the technologies of the future? Okay, hang on a second. Okay, we're going to talk about some of these technologies. You may have heard of them before, you may not. If you have a question about them, shoot it to the Q&A at the bottom. We'll talk about it in more detail. Okay, this gets a lot of play. Alternative fuel vehicles. There's all kinds of these, right? There's you know, natural gas or propane or electric or hydrogen, whatever, right? But what's coming, and if you have a new car, if you happen to go buy a new Range Rover as an example, man, the command center in that thing is unbelievable. And it's connected to the internet and it's pushing information to you. You can send information out. You can watch the news. You can look for traffic. I mean, that information is being fused. Remember that word. We're going to use it more in this conversation. Is being fused into a single or a couple displays for you to see as you drive. Right? I remember moving from Pensacola Naval Air Station to the San Diego Coronado Naval Air Station. And I called the AAA and I said, hey, I got to make this move. Can you send me some maps? And they sent me a lined out series of maps that's like this tall. And that's what I had to use to go from from Pensacola to San Diego. Think about how far we've come, folks. You know, that's right now. You go home, you put some, you want to, if you're in your future truck or your current truck or your Range Rover, you push go home and bam, there's your route with traffic. Do you know how hard that is to do? And we have normalized it, right? And so therefore, we need to leverage it in our businesses. What does this mean, alternative fuel vehicles in the future? Look, no one knows. We're going to talk more about it in a couple more slides here. But I'm just not a believer that electric trucks are ever going to be able to go for the long haul, but they might very well be able to do the businesses around town. Spots, for instance, could be done by electric trucks. But what we know is FedEx did an analysis of their facilities, and they didn't have a single facility in the country that had the electrical infrastructure necessary to support a transition to EVs. Okay, so that's a major stumbling block. That's going to have to get resolved, or they're going to tell us to keep our trucks somewhere else and charge them, right? So there's a lot of things to be worked out there. Platooning. So what is platooning? Okay, one of the things that's being talked about with independent vehicles, and by the way, there's people out there that are talking about driverless trucks, but I'm not worried about that anytime soon. But what I do think is coming is autonomous trucks that have a driver in each truck, but only the driver in the front truck has the ability to drive. And the truck in the rear is going to be using technology, drafting, and following where that truck goes. Okay, that's called platooning. Look that up on the internet. That's going to happen. We already know that's very fuel efficient, but it's also going to be extremely efficient from the standpoint of using technology to manage every step of it. The driver essentially won't be doing anything unless there's a break, the system has a major fault, or no matter what the truck is doing, then there's going to be an accident. Now, the experience with these autonomous vehicles, whether it in the platoons or whatever, is that oftentimes the driver has intervened, and he probably shouldn't have, because the system was going to handle the problem. Okay, so it's going to be interesting how this develops over time. And remember, the command center in the trucks is going to get better and better and better. So there are going to be autonomous trucks driving. They're going to have drivers in the cockpit. Look, commercial jets are fully autonomous. They have triple redundant systems. There are things that happen on occasion that requires a pilot to get involved. The door blows out. That's a problem. But that doesn't happen very often. Keep that in mind. The Internet of Things and telematics. Okay, the Internet of Things is the ability for almost every device around to connect to the internet, which makes it reachable to you all the time. It also makes it reachable to scammers, right? This is a true story. I was working in a company, and we had a brand new printer. This was in 2007. It had a monster hard drive on board. And one day the federal authorities walked in and told us that printer, which was an online printer, was being used as part of a distributed network of hard drives and computers to run a major series of porn sites. Yeah, a printer. I couldn't believe it. That was my first experience with that kind of thing. Okay, and so the Internet of Things is going to make that even more likely. So it's going to be interesting how technology comes along to protect your devices so that somebody doesn't turn off your heat in the winter and say, look, if you pay me $5,000, I'll turn it back on. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. In trucks, it's going to be interesting as well, because there's a ton of devices that are already available that are connecting to each other. And for instance, if you look at, we'll use Trimble as an example. If you have a device, you can pay Trimble to operate on their cellular connection to provide, for instance, trailer tracking services or whatever through the Trimble connection. So this kind of technology is coming to the individual device on the truck, such that a company like Trimble can sell to vendors, maybe somebody like me, for instance, the ability to operate services on your truck through their data stream. Crazy. Then there's telematics. What is telematics? Well, it's kind of any type of data that's transmitted through the mobile network. Okay, and every new truck has this built in. If you're buying new trucks and you're not leveraging those telematics, you are missing out. Okay, you need to be doing that. Now, Look, I've done it. It's incredibly complex. And I'm not going to be here to coach you on Detroit telematics, right? I mean, they need to do that for you. But it's amazing information. Amazing information. But you have other telematics devices, your Vetter, your ELD. If you're using our tire view system, that's telematics. If your FCAM is a kind of a telematics device, you know, and we can use that as an example of technology that contractors fought. And we probably fought it because of the way it was rolled out. But, you know, not everybody was happy with it. Some people even ended up selling their company because of it. But what FCAM did in the first full year of its implementation is reduced rear end accidents by 30%. And it's just gone up from there. FedEx Freight saw an overall 70% reduction in rear end collisions. And so the cost of insurance at FedEx has gone down because of that, right? The cost of lawsuits and accidents has gone down because of that. And I personally think that the next technology that we're going to see on trucks is the side scan radars or side scan mirrors. Going to be one of the two. You're going to have those on your trucks. Now, we ran into this with FCAM because you couldn't get the retrofit kits. And I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole today. But look, I had a bunch of accidents that were side swipes, right? It's going to be the next thing. And it will be a good thing. And we'll all fight it. But ultimately, it will be a good thing, and it will reduce accidents, which will reduce your cost of insurance, hopefully. Big data analytics. Okay, I've been doing this a long time, okay? And you've heard me say quality principle number 4, get command of the data. Manage with data, right? Metrics and data. You can't do metrics without data. And you certainly can't do your first step in getting metrics, as we talked about in session 7, is get command of the data. And that's harder than it looks. Okay, now in the line haul business, my ground force has command of the data. I challenge anybody to question how we get the data and what we do with the data. It is rock solid. It's based on big data science. I mean, it's rock solid. And whatever you're doing in your business, big data is going to have to be a part of it. Okay, big data just means collecting as much data as you possibly can and then leveraging state-of-the-art, I'll use the word algorithms. Some of it's AI, some of it's machine learning, some of it's RPA. We're going to talk about that. And you're going to get outputs from that analysis, and then you use that output to either facilitate a new analysis or to make operational changes in your business. And we've been talking about this throughout the whole webinar series. But look, this is what's already happening in every industry. Okay, we even talked about McDonald's back a few weeks ago. They're already adopting AI using those kiosks. That's an incredibly advanced tool that distributes that activity to the customer themselves. It's kind of like customer checkout at the grocery store. That's an incredibly challenging technology to deliver on a reliable basis. As we see every time it don't work for us, right? That McDonald's kiosk kicks my ass every time, just so you know. Okay, I try not to go there anymore. Okay, don't hold me accountable for junk food. I haven't been to McDonald's in months. All right. The other technology of the future, and it's here to some degree, but technology adept humans. Okay, it is incredibly unlikely that the normal life, things that go on in life are going to be completely automated and everybody's going to be sitting home on their bum and some robot's going to be bringing them a drink, you know. That's just not going to happen. Like Rosie the robot in the Jetsons, that stuff is way out there. There's going to be robots. You might have a robot in your house, but they're not going to be fully autonomous and able to do everything. There's going to be humans in the loop. There's humans in your loop now. Okay, we're talking about things of the future, but you have to operate now, and much of this is already available. But if you don't have technology adept humans, you're not going to be able to take advantage of it. Step one in a technology adept human is being open to the technology. If you're a contractor, you set the role, you set the model for your company. You're role modeling the idea that technology is key. And you as the owner are now accepting technology, and you're going to force it on everybody else. Everybody else is going to have to get on board. But I've had customers come on board the software, they save tons of money, and then they say, you know, I just like my spreadsheets. And they drop. Okay, and it happens to anybody in this space. It happens. Customers churn, and they churn because they got 3 people doing spreadsheets, and they kind of like the feel of that. They're comfortable with it. And what I say is that's the express lane to going bankrupt in this industry. Look, revenue, we talked last week. You will not be able to earn your way out of what we're in. You're going to have to squeeze your cost basis. We're going to talk about that. And that's going to require technology adept humans. Okay. All of you heard this. You've heard this many, many times. API. What is an API? So I thought I would just tell you what it is. It's an application programming interface. And in layman's terms, what that means, it's the ability for devices to communicate with each other. It's the ability for you to take your cell phone and make a deposit at the bank. You're using an app that's facilitating APIs. Now, those are custom built. They're not dynamic all the time, and it allows devices to communicate, and it allows you to get data from remote sources. Okay, all right. RPA, what is RPA? You probably don't hear that very often because the only company doing this in the trucking space is my ground force. I've been told by the experts in Silicon Valley that no one is doing with RPA what we do with it. And again, we talked about this, but just to remind you, we'll use RPA to facilitate, say, 30 or 40 independent workflows. And then we use the RPA to take the output from those workflows and we integrate them across all those workflows to make your business matrixed and fully. Things are going on that you don't even know happen. It's like ordering food on your cell phone. There's stuff happening that you have no idea that's going on in my ground force, but you don't have to know. Okay? You just need to do the part that you need to do, and the system will do the rest. And RPA is an advanced type of AI, right? So RPA is essentially has the ability to replace the human. If you have a repetitive human task, any administrative task as an example, I can replace it 100% of the time and do it better with 100% accuracy. That's what RPA is. That's why we use it. LLM, large language model. You've heard of this. You've heard of ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a large language model. It's the first one that's come out there. Other people have come out with it. We have our own. We're working with it. You will soon be able to talk to my ground force. Okay, and so we built our own because ChatGPT and the others weren't sufficient for what we needed to do, and they would have been very expensive for us to use for you. And so we built our own large language model. How many other folks in this space can do that, right? So we have that. You're going to be seeing it sooner than you think. What is machine learning? I'm sure you hear this a lot. If you talk to FedEx, they throw this term around like a softball. So it turns out they only have 3 people in their machine learning department, though. That's not a lot of machine learning capability. I got more than that on my team. So what is machine learning? Well, it just focuses on taking data and algorithms, like we've already discussed, to enable different types of artificial intelligence to imitate the way humans learn, and then gradually improving the accuracy, right? So it just gets better over time. For instance, you can get a camera that if it takes you can get an AI solution for a camera that after it sees enough pictures, it can begin to tell you whether or not that picture is compliant with the standard. Okay, and this is one of the things I'm working on because I hope to someday deliver all the tractor files for FedEx. I'm working on that kind of technology. I haven't convinced them yet, but I've talked to them about it. They're intrigued, and it's going to take that kind of AI to be able to do it. But think about fully automated tractor files. Man, would that be awesome? Hopefully, I'll get the chance to do it. Okay, so what then is the future of technology in trucking? Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of motherhood and apple pie statements, but nonetheless, they're true. So the technology for AVs is already here. It's making rapid strides, but pretty much everybody says complete automation of the long haul trucking business is years, if not decades away. So in other words, trucks going down the road without a driver in them. But there will be trucks that are AVs going down the road with a driver in it as an emergency procedure who will 99.9% of the time just sit in a cockpit and drink coffee and eat donuts. That's the future. They say by 2027, fully autonomous trucks using these platoons, which we talked about, would appear on highways. That ain't that far off, folks. And it might be interested if you look at Birmingham. Okay, we'd send 8 or 10 runs to Nashville every night. That's not happening anymore, but let's say they're still sending 6. Well, you could schedule those guys together and send 3 platoons of 2. That could happen. We'll see what happens. I'm not forecasting what FedEx is going to do, by the way. I'm not speaking for FedEx ever. I'm just giving examples of where that application might be used. And then clearly, artificial intelligence, this data science, all kinds of things are going to be used to advance what's going on in the trucking world, right? And all that's going to be used on the trucks themselves. So there's no doubt. Look back what I just talked about in airplanes, right? During the same period, we focused on communications, right, in computers. But let's think about airplanes. In 1985, I picked up an airplane from the factory and flew it back to the squadron that was flying with tape drives. Today, my son, who's an Air Force fighter pilot, has technology that I couldn't even have dreamed of. Even the science fiction writers could not have even dreamed of what these guys are flying with today. The F-35 is so beyond your imagination that you probably can't even handle it. I mean, what it can do is unbelievable. And now we're going to talk about that now, but just think 40 years from tape drives to invisible airplanes that can remotely control missiles fired by another ship or airplane or land-based system. Not to mention what's going on in the airline industry. If you recall, there were a lot of crashes in the 60s and 70s. You never hear of a crash anymore. It just doesn't happen. And when it does happen, it's usually because the pilots really made a terrible mistake. Okay, so airlines are incredibly reliable because this kind of work has been done to enhance airline safety. It's coming for trucking. It's already here. Okay, last slide. So what about my ground force? You know, because obviously we're hosting this webinar series. We haven't focused a lot on the My Ground Force technology, but this is a technology discussion, and I would be remiss if I didn't give you a little insight on what we're doing from the technology standpoint. So I have kind of developed, not kind of, I have formulated the strategy for My Ground Force to be a fusion of technology. I told you to remember that word. So technology fusion, what does that mean? That means we are using RPA. We talked about RPA. We are using machine learning. We talked about that. We are using APIs. And then we're using your data. Some of it we acquire electronically, some of it you manually enter, some of it we create from our analysis. And we're using data from telematics devices via the APIs. And we're fusing all that together to give you a seamless solution. You just look at your dashboards. But when you look at your dashboards, that is a fusion of a multitude of technologies. But you looked at those dashboards in session 6. You didn't feel too stressed by it, I don't think. You understood the data. But that was a fusion of multiple technologies. And we're working on a whole lot more, okay? So let's talk about that. So the future is here when it comes to these kinds of things. Now, am I saying we're the most advanced platform on the planet? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we're the most advanced platform for your business, and let's talk about that. So we're focused on the fusion of multiple advanced technologies. This is not something that's going to happen 5 years from now. It's here now. And we're focused on fusing those advanced technologies with technology adept humans. Remember, we use that term. Now, that's not my term. I didn't come up with it. That's in the future documents that I study hard for these webinars, right? And I came across that term that I really liked, technology adept humans. And we're using this to what I think, and you're hearing it for the first time today, to revolutionize the line haul space. What did we just talk about? We need to be able to detach the cost curve from the growth curve. And if your growth curve is flat, we got to lower this, right? We got to lower the cost to operate. So that part there is margin. And we're not going to earn our way out of this. So we have really two ways to grow right now. The occasional posting that might happen in certain locations, but not many. And then the opportunity to buy struggling businesses as they depart the space because they refuse to adapt technology and they only want to use spreadsheets and people, and they're going out of business. I'm going to tell you right now, they'll be gone. The next 2 years is going to squeeze them out. And I'll be here 2 years from now, and we can do a roundup and see who survived. So what are we coming out with? RoboTracks is our newest feature. We've been testing it. It works amazing. We've been testing it live in the FedEx network with a couple very, very skilled customers. So what is it? What is it? We are going to dispatch and arrive your tractors automatically using telematics in our TMS, because we have one. We're not able to talk to FedEx yet. I'm working on that. But we're going to do it in our system, and it's going to work for every FedEx location, every spot, and every butthead. We're going to capture all the information. When a truck leaves Birmingham on his way to Nashville, we're going to send your operations team a text that says, this truck just left Birmingham. You're going to have a down to the second time hack on when that truck left. And we're going to log that information in the system. And then it's going to arrive in Nashville, and it's going to give you a text. This truck just arrived in Nashville. And we're going to log that. It's going to be the same for spots. It's going to be the same for butt heads, all of that. We're going to auto-create. We're not using geofencing, but we're going to auto-create the locations in our system. We'll show you how to do that. And then our system will manage all that for you. You'll have a map. You can track your trucks around the country. You hover over, it's going to say, oh, this is truck 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's got Smith and Jones are in the truck, and its origin was Birmingham. All this is going to be done for you. We're going to automate 60% of what an operations manager does. And it's all recorded for historical record. Okay? That's already here. That's not coming. It's already out there with some customers. We're going to be releasing it in the next couple weeks. API aggregation. Okay, so I talked to a company that's called With Terminal. You can look them up. Those rascals, they're 25-year-olds, and they went through the Y Combinator, and they got those guys to give them $3.7 million to build an API aggregator. So what is that? That means they have a system that can talk to multiple API sources. Maybe it's Trimble, maybe it's Motive, maybe it's Omnitrax, maybe it's DriveWise. Bring all that data into one system and then feed it to a customer through one interface. Pretty cool, right? Well, what's more cool about it is we've had that for 2 years. I didn't know I could go get money from the Y Combinator to do that. Damn, how dumb am I? So we already had this. We're ahead of the market. Okay, so we can pull data from every telematics device on the planet. We can already do it. And then we incorporate that telematics into my ground force. The future is here. And we're in the process, and it's going to be ready to go by the Line Haul Summit, and in some cases now, but let's say Line Haul Summit. And remember, that's June 12th. We're going to talk about that again in a second. By the Line Haul Summit, you're going to be able to outsource every one of your functions to my ground force. We're going to combine state-of-the-art, cutting-edge, leading-edge technology with smart hands to run your company for you on a JIT basis, just in time. Remember, I came from the manufacturing world, And we tried not to bring in raw materials until we needed it, because then as soon as we got it, we made something with it and we shipped it and got revenue with it, right? But another way of looking at just in time is you get it when you need it, and you get the volume of it that you need. If you need 2 hours of HR, you get 2 hours of HR. If you need an hour of HR, you get an hour of HR. You have an automatic support system where you don't have to tell people to manage your logbooks. We'll manage it for you. We'll coach your drivers on better. We'll teach your incoming drivers defensive driving. We have a defensive driving course. We have all the things that go on inside your company. We can deliver on them, except operations management. Somebody needs to talk to drivers. Somebody needs to talk to FedEx. But we're going to make those operations managers so much more effective because they're going to have key performance information at their fingertips. Okay? Everything you need to run your company, we're going to be able to give it to you. And why does that matter? Because, well, not yet. Because that's going to allow you to squeeze your cost basis to the minimum possible. You just pay for what you need. You don't pay for anything extra. And we're going to squeeze it because right now it might be a little less efficient today than it will be 6 months from now. And why would I say that on this call? Well, remember, my ground force today is on release 1.71. That means we've done 72 releases in 25 months. Every 2 weeks, we get a little bit better. And so what we release today on this new fusion solution, 6 months from now, it's going to be way more efficient, which means that we're going to be able to continue to deliver it, hopefully with a lower cost increase over time. That's what you're looking for, right? So the other thing that's coming is the large language model. You may already use this. You may have a Google device or Alexa. Hey, Alexa, play Baby Shark, right? That's what goes on in my house with the grandkids. Well, you're going to be able to talk to my ground force. Now, at least initially, we're not going to talk back to you, but very soon, you're not going to have to be able to understand what question you ask. Just ask Raquel the robot, let's call it, in my ground force, and you're going to get an answer. It's going to come on your screen. It's going to be like 2001 all over again. This is not stuff that's coming 5 years from now. We can do it now. We've already done the work on this. It's ready. So, questions. Are you on board with the Technology Express? And you're getting a poll question right now about business coaching. If you want coaching, you can get it at support@mygroundforce.com. Just tell us what you want. I'll be in touch with you and we can formulate it. Look, I'm not trying to create a multi-million-dollar consulting firm here, right? But some of this stuff you need coaching on to understand. You need to have the ability to understand your metrics. You need to have the ability to understand how to make better decisions in your company, how to write strategy, how to prepare for what's coming. Or maybe you're considering an acquisition. We have a version of the software. We can analyze the acquisition for you. If you're a My Ground Force customer and you want to sell your company, as I've told you before, brokers are telling us, man, if they're My Ground Force customers, their business is worth more. And if you sell to a company that continues with My Ground Force, then we will transfer that data to them. If you go buy a company and you want that information and you're a My Ground Force customer, we just did this for a new customer. We do it all the time. They bought another company that was not a My Ground Force customer. We pulled all their data for a year into My Ground Force so that our customer that just purchased that company now can see all that year's worth of historical data in one system. Nobody else can do that for you. Okay, and so that's where we are. And we're going to take some questions. So they're texting me the questions. Forgive me for looking down here. Oh, so there's a question here. Some drivers, and they use the word baby boomers, but I would say it's not just baby boomers. They're good drivers, but they struggle with technology. And how do you keep them current? Look, step one, and we talked about this, they have to be open to the technology, right? And one of the things that we're gonna do a new webinar series in the fall, probably started in August, and I'm working on the name, but I think I'm gonna call it adapting to the chaos. Okay, and part of that is accepting chaos as your paradigm. Truck drivers are going to have to accept that technology is now their paradigm. I mean, look at them. They have FCAN, they have VETR, they have ELDs, they have incredibly complicated truck dashboards. They have the ability to get GPS on their phone, right? And they're all going place to place using their phone. They can text, they can call. They're already familiar with technology because they're using it. They just need to change their mindset. So you need to develop a technique in your company to help them with that mindset. And we're going to have some training that can help with that. But look, they're going to have to get on board. Remember those guys that said they would never be able to use an ELD? They were just going to keep doing paper logs. How many of those guys do you still have on your team? They either adapted or they're gone. They can't drive trucks anymore. A lot of those guys left the FedEx space to go drive logging trucks because they didn't have to do logbooks anymore, right? I knew a bunch of those guys in Alabama. Well, look, they'll just disappear. I mean, look, the wave of change is coming, and you have two choices. You can surf it, or you can get run over by it. You got to make a choice. It's here. You cannot any longer go buy a truck without electronic fuel injection. No matter how much you like points and plugs, you can't get it anymore. Okay, and it is an advancement that's here to stay. And the technology is going to accelerate, as we've already talked about. Wait till that driver tries to get into an autonomous vehicle that's doing everything for him, and he's got to sit on his hands and drink coffee for 6 hours, right? Wait till he tries that one. So they're going to have to adapt. Okay, no questions. Hopefully you found this useful today. I know it's a little bit of a challenging conversation. Hopefully you are excited as I am about the fusion that we're offering, the technology fusion that we're offering from My Ground Force. Obviously, there'll be more to come. But, you know, pretty much anything you do in your business, we're going to be able to do it for you. And we'll do it at a minimum cost so that you buy just enough of it, what you need. It'll be a fractional solution. And we're going to make you more cost efficient via technology and via technology adept humans that are fused together. You see our background, right? It's got a human hand and a robot handshake. Okay, so we're bringing both of those together. That's always been our strategy. We just haven't talked about it. Now we're here. We're where My Ground Force wanted to go. Now the solution is here. The technology fusion is live, and you can have it in your company. So remember, register for the Line Haul Summit. Put in the Ground Force 24 to get a discount on your registration. Next week at 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, we're going to talk about the science of decision making. Okay, decision making as a science in your company. Do you have a methodology for establishing priorities, for taking those priorities and evaluating them and turning them into effective decisions, and then evaluating that decision for its future proof? I'll call it future proofing the decision. If you don't have all that, hey, tune in next week. We're going to talk about how to learn how to do that. You can check out these webinars on mygroundforce.com. They're all there. You can also check out our YouTube channel is My Ground Force. And you can also find everything else you need on mygroundforce.com. If you got any questions, comments, or you want to talk to us about services, just email us at support@mygroundforce.com. Thanks again for checking in this week as we continue with this webinar series. It's getting rave reviews. We'll appreciate everybody's feedback. Prosper during the FedEx transformation. Learn to think like a Fortune 500 executive. This is Tim Goff. You guys have a great week. See ya.